Welcome to Stories with Traction, unedited and unfiltered. These are real conversations with leaders who have walked through trials and triumph. In a world of AI-polished sound bites and scripted perfection, this podcast isn't about being flawless. It's about being purposeful. I'm your host, Matt Zahn. We're going to find out what drives these leaders, what's their story, and how can we learn from their experiences. Get inspired and enjoy Stories with Traction. Nick, welcome to Stories with Traction podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I'm excited to dive in. Before we get into, your story, your upbringing, I love asking this question. There's a lot we can learn from this. So first question, when you're at a networking event or a party and someone asks you, what do you do? What's your response to that question?
That's a great question because I've been thinking a lot about that actually specific question for some time now. And what I came up with is, you know how people hate working with IT people? Well, generally we fix that because people really, it's funny, they enjoy working with us, not because we're not weird. We still are weird. They enjoy working with us because we actually produce the outcomes that we said we would.
I love that. Why do you think people hate working with IT people?
There is a certain amount of awkwardness, and I think highly technical or maybe even engineers themselves, we work with a lot of engineers as well. They operate at a certain level in their brain, and I feel like that can tend to, not all the time, but it can tend to shut off maybe some of the personality parts of the brain. And maybe that comes off as judgmental. I certainly don't mean it to be because I have several people in my life like that and I love them to death. But it can tend to then feel like there's not a human element to it. You're just like really good at talking and working with computers. And that's off-putting, I think, to some people.
For sure. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, right? Like we all have our own strengths. And what's interesting, what I'm hearing you say is often the decision makers that are working with individuals that are highly skilled with what they do, that are in a completely different universe, but they need to be in that universe to, whether it's protecting people from cybersecurity issues or what have, there's a disconnect, right? So how is your company different from some of these maybe awkward experiences that someone might have?
Yeah, I think this is something I've been preaching a lot this past year. I think people in my company are probably tired of hearing this, but I said there's a huge difference between providing a good customer service and a great customer experience. You might have technically done something really well, and in fact, more often is not the case. You do it at a really high level, but users don't always end up caring a whole lot about the service part because they don't understand it anyway. They just care about how you made them feel. If their question was answered in a way they felt like they're not dumb because maybe they don't understand some of the technical pieces. So it's all about that experience. And so how are you handling customer expectations? How are you handling what they're ultimately expecting, which is not just a satisfied, hey, you fixed my XYZ computer problem. It's how you made them feel during that process. So we do a lot of talking and conversation around that. In fact, it's something we regularly bring up in our weekly meetings. Hey, what customer experience this week do people need help with or challenge that they ran across, and how are we tackling that as a company then?
I love that. That's so important. So you mentioned there's a big difference between good customer service and a great experience because let's not kid ourselves, right? When I think of working with IT and IT challenges, like that just seems like a chore to me. So getting someone from feeling like it's a chore to having a good customer experience is a stretch, and then taking it a step further and going from good customer experience to or a good customer service to an actual experience, like a great experience, that's an even bigger stretch. So what's maybe one or two things that you could point to that you do as a company that would create that great experience for your clients?
Yeah, that's a good question because instead of looking at how well we answer the phones, which is by any marks important, like when somebody calls in with an issue, you need to be able to answer the phone really well. That's generally speaking good customer service. But what our company looks at doing is attacking how do we eliminate these issues to begin with? And then IT generally fades to the background. We actually kind of turn it around and get in front of your face a little bit more. So we actually have people dedicated in our organization to meet with our customers on a regular basis, like walking around. How are things going? How are you doing? If you could have one problem solved this week that kind of annoys you, but maybe not enough to like call in or email in about, what would it be? And people aren't used to that. Like especially an IT person or a technical person that's asking those types of questions. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort. It just takes intentionality. And so when we have our customers that happens with, we're human. We're not perfect. We still make mistakes, and unfortunately, because we're human, we'll continue to make mistakes. But it does eliminate a lot of maybe frustrating barriers along the way. And it's been a really important part of how we deliver a great customer experience, because most oftentimes than not, and I preach this again, a great customer experience is built in the margins. It's not built in the big things. It's usually the little details that catch people and just really set you apart. And so that's one thing. A great customer experience is in the little details. And so having direct conversation, which might seem backwards to some people, is really important to us.
Yeah, I really like what you said about those little margins, because also indirectly you're communicating to your clients that the little details matter, which, as you know, is incredibly important for anyone doing IT, is that there's all these little details that you need to be aware of in order to make it work properly. So you're not only offering that great experience, but indirectly you're showing individuals like, no, we really do pay attention to the small details, which I think is a really good company culture to create for sure. I do want to hit the rewind button. I love unpacking people's just their upbringing and how they were able to position themselves to what they do today. So if I had a remote control and I could hit rewind and we can go back to teen Nick, right? If I asked 13-year-old Nick what he wanted to do, B, what kind of response would I have gotten in return?
So I have a letter I wrote to myself in fourth grade. So we're getting pretty close to that 13-year-old mark, about 9 or 10 or 11 years old. And it, I wanted to play Penn State football in college. That was my plan, and then go play for the Philadelphia Eagles. Fourth, fifth graders dream big, man. And that was like my intent and plan. And the letter written to myself was, don't forget to make this happen. I actually had that written down at one part. It's like, you will play for Penn State, and then you will go play for the Philadelphia Eagles. And it's great. I love reading it because it reminds me that I just dream big at that point, because the reality is it's a 1 in a million, or probably even greater chance, but it was a lot of fun. I love going back to that kind of moment, but that would have been my dream back then for sure. Certainly not where I'm at today.
Do you still have the letter?
I do, yeah. Sitting at home, it was one of the things that I discovered when I got married. I got married, I guess, 11 years ago now, moving out of my parents' place. Um, I found it in a bunch of stuff, and I was like, all right, I need to make sure I know where this is at. So yeah, it's still at my house. I brought it with me, and it was kind of a fun little read.
That's awesome. So I wrote a letter as well right around that age. So I remember I was just writing out all these different things that I had envisioned for my future. And then I hid the letter, right? I didn't want anyone to read it. I felt like a little bit, I guess, embarrassed by it. But the problem was I hid it too well. So to this
Oh
day, I
man.
can't find it. I'm sure it got lost in some type of
Oh,
move or something, but it would have been really exciting to kind of go back
yeah.
and read that. So take us through like potential disappointment with that. Did you play football in high school?
Yeah, I did. I played football and baseball. I would say for that vast majority of my teenage years, probably not unlike a lot of teenagers today, sports pretty well dominated my life. I loved being able to run around and create a lot of great moments. I mean, I certainly enjoyed my teammates. I certainly enjoyed the game and the competition in itself. Like that was a lot of fun to me to be able to, I don't know, I just whatever it was ingrained in me, I just love being able to compete and have a lot of fun. Obviously, it was more fun when you were winning, but either way, I still have a lot of fond memories of those years. So it was interesting to me then when towards the end of my high school, I actually chose to forego my senior year of any sporting activities, which was interesting looking back. I did that for a very specific reason. I had had the opportunity to graduate early and I decided to take it. I had no clue what I wanted to do at the time. And so I decided, hey, let me graduate early. I'll graduate and after the first semester is over in high school. And then I'm actually going to travel overseas with a missions agency and spend the next 9 to 10 months in a third world country. And so that's what I did. Which is a total pivot in terms of like what my plans were with playing professional football. I ended up in the country of Honduras, and I spent many months living there, living in communities that would really change your perspective on the world, is one way to put it. And that really shifted then moving back in terms of how I viewed my own life and own culture and my own story, so to speak, and what I did moving forward.
Wow. All right. So take us to this. So you're in Honduras. I'm sure there's major culture shock with that. What were some of the things that you learned through that experience?
We have it good. And maybe this is oversimplifying it, but in America, I don't think you realize how good we have it. And it's not like that everywhere. America is still a very big country, and so in that regard, yeah, it's still very different. But just the geopolitical space, for example, I mean, it was not uncommon for me to walk the streets, and the police were just as corrupt, and there's actual like bodies laying around and drugs were rampant. But that's we weren't there to really change the culture, right? We were there to learn and figure out our own life, and they were and the Hondurans themselves would teach us quite a bit. And so that culture shock in terms of what I was used to, I mean, I would say I grew up in middle class America. That was really eye opening. Hey, most of the world does not operate as good as we have it. And so really that just coming back here, I even say I carry a lot of these stories with me today, and how I view what I have in my own life. Like, man, I am blessed. I feel like have a lot going on in my life where I'm just so grateful for the opportunities presented every single day, because these are opportunities that just don't exist in some of these communities living in a third world country.
I appreciate that perspective. A few years ago, I'll never forget, I was working with a particular CEO. I don't have permission to share this story, so I won't mention the name of this individual, but this is a massive company. And I was coaching him communication wise. We were talking about this individual goes out, does conference talks, does a whole bunch of things, but was really focused on nonprofits as well. So ran this company, and then on the weekends helped with different nonprofits. And I remember asking him, I said, were you born in poverty? Is that why you have a heart for working with individuals that don't have as much privilege as you? And I'll never forget his response. He said, no, I was born into great wealth, but I didn't really understand what actual challenges were. So I started focusing on working with individuals that do have hardship in life, and it changed my perspective on what something that was actually hard. And he says, I'll come into work on Monday morning and I'll meet with my executive leadership team, and they'll talk to me about challenges, right? And I'm using air quotes for people listening with the audio. Challenges here, challenges there. And he'll think to himself, like, over the weekend, I was working with people that had to decide whether they should purchase medicine to keep them alive or purchase food because they were hungry. Like, that's a challenge, right? So there was a major perspective shift with him, and I'll never forget that, because I've often thought of that. Like, if you are even in the middle class in the United States, in most suburbs or most cities around the country, you're in the top 1% of 1%. Like, I'm holding a smartphone in my hand right now. Like, there were kings throughout history that couldn't even dream of having something like this. Indoor plumbing. The other day I was eating, I don't know, I think it was an orange, or I had a lemon or something that I was putting in my water. And I'm thinking, like, kings would literally kill to have access to food that we drive to the grocery store and have access to. It's just wild to think about. So based on your experience in Honduras, did that position you to be able to handle challenges in business? I don't want to say easier, but maybe a little bit more seamless than someone that might not have experienced those hardships.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think when we're presented with our challenges, and I'll speak for myself, I won't speak for other people. It's very self-centered. It's very self-focused. Okay, there's stress. How am I going to get through this? What am I going to do? And I think one of the quickest ways for us to think freely and remove challenges from our life is to kind of work from this state of gratitude, is one way to look at it, and that's the way I look at it. And so when I saw some of these challenges on Honduras and now today, to your point, I mean, I resonate so much with that story with the person that you were working with, because yeah, some of these challenges don't seem like that big of a challenge, and yes, they're important. Yes, I want to make good business decisions. Yes, they do affect the lives of my employees, but not as radically as some of the decisions that the people in the community we served had to face every single day. And I'll give you one really quick example of this is there was a young boy at the time, this is obviously a bunch of years ago, but at the time he was 15 years old and he was the head of the household because his parents had just up and left. And then there is no child services in this community, in this country. He just, this is it. He's the head of the household. And now his job is to care for his several siblings in this ramshackled hut that's kind of a couple tin barriers held up. And when you see him tackling work every day for what might be $1 a day, running around collecting garbage throughout the city, and he comes home and he puts a smile on his face and his family's taken care of, it's like, okay, you know, I I want to be grateful. I want to be grateful for what I have in front of me. It's one of the things I want to incorporate in my own kids' lives. And my wife and I try to lead from a place of gratitude. And my dad and I have this business together here, and we want to live a life full of gratitude. And a lot of that, when we start looking at challenges that we're facing, yeah, we'll tackle them. But if we can just start from a place where our hearts are full and we're good, we're all good. This isn't, the perspective is so healthy.
Oh my God. I really appreciate you sharing that story. I can't even imagine being 15 years old and taking care of siblings. That's just wow. I'm thinking of how immature I was at 15 and just the thought of it is it's wild, right? Wild. All right. So
Yeah.
you're experiencing all this. You had mentioned you were there around 9 months and then you come back to the States. And then from there, did you link up with your father in business or were there other things that happened before that took place?
No, that's pretty much what happened. I came back and pretty much my worldview is being really shattered and then reshaped, reformed, obviously, through a couple of stories we just told. And my dad had just started this business. And I said, hey, I don't have anything else to do. I don't know what I want to do yet. I am feeling like my world's being rocked. So can I just come work for you? He said, sure. I don't have any money. So if you could work for free, that'd be great. And it's a story I like to tell people a lot because I said, yeah, I was the first employee and I was unpaid for a while and I had to pay my own dues over some time. What I found then as my dad and I together got this business off the ground is it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the business so much, and obviously I stayed. So it's really the only true career I had coming out of high school, and I would have never envisioned that I love business and learning people and getting to figure out how to go to market with services that maybe aren't always appreciated. I would never have realized how much I love that aspect of business, and so I've had a lot of fun over these past several years together.
So you're one of the first employee, I guess the first employee. You mentioned you
Yep,
weren't getting paid right
nope.
away, right? So you yourself had some struggle. You had a lot of learning. You had trial and error. Do you do you ever get frustrated when people may think that you were just kind of born into this, like you stepped into a thriving company, like that you're living in your father's shadow somehow, but you yourself were right there in the trenches. You were gutting it out. You had to go through the grit to get everything up and running. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for most of my friends, close friends, I would say specifically, they knew like, hey, this guy's got to build something from nothing. So I'm really grateful for them and their support through this time. And right over the course of that time as well, I met my wife, well, my now wife, excuse me, and then a couple years after that, we got married. And so I would say for the most part, that hasn't been a huge challenge. Although I think the perception of simply being a business owner has had a lot of thoughts or assumptions with it in terms of what it is. I would say that has been a more of a challenge than maybe perhaps I was gifted this, just because most people who know me know that, hey, like literally my dad had started this business, and no longer of 4 months after he started this business, I came along and just tag team and joined him up. And so most people know that story. But yeah, the perception of being a business owner, and that like, hey, you're a business owner, you probably have things figured out, right? And you're probably got a lot going on, and you're just doing so well, and then life is so easy because you have employees now. I would say that's maybe a bigger perception that maybe people get wrong pretty well.
All right, so let's talk about some of those assumptions. So you had mentioned it's easy, you have things figured out. It's interesting to me because I've worked with a lot of high achievers, a lot of business owners, a lot of people that society would put on pedestals. And what's interesting is every single person has some form of an inferiority complex. Every person has fumbled and bumbled their way to establishing something, building something. So talk to us a little bit about that. Maybe some perceptions you had about business ownership that just weren't based in reality, and what are some other assumptions that some people might have pegged you with that just simply aren't true?
Yeah, so I think one of the assumptions is, I kind of relate it to having kids. A lot of people can tell you what it's like, but then when you have kids and then you go through the sleepless nights, you're like, whoa, all right, we've hit another level of understanding what that actually means. And so I would say getting into business ownership would, I won't relate it to having kids, like maybe that's a little unfair, but it's like that in the sense of most people see from the outside, oh, you have employees, you bought a company vehicle. But most people don't realize is, yeah, the company vehicle was purchased, so my employees don't have to use their own vehicles and they can go around. So that costs a lot of money to buy that. That's not like cash laying around everywhere. So again, there's a lot of behind the scenes, and people only see, well, he got this, he has this asset, he has that asset. So automatically he must be just totally nailing every decision. And I would say that most business owners I work with say, well, yeah, most of that was filled with a whole lot of failure until I figured out which decision worked well for me. And so I would say that's probably been the case for myself as well, is I've made a lot of really poor decisions. And to be honest, I probably will make some more poor decisions again. That's how I'm going to learn. But I would say it's a lot of poor decisions that helped shape some of the better decisions that were made that helped us grow and helped us get where we're at today.
I appreciate the example that you shared regarding having kids. Right? There's a difference in thinking of what it's like having children and then actually having children. It's very difficult to read a book on how to be a good parent and then not being a parent, right? But then actually being a father, being a mother, and then you realize this is a little different than I had envisioned. I always used to make a joke like it is near impossible to read a book how to effectively ski down a black diamond, right? I don't know if anyone has read a book on how to ski and then just naturally they could do that, right? Like you actually have to have the reps and understand and you have to fall and you have to get up. And the same is true with being a parent. The same is true with running a business. I am interested to know if you had nothing right now. Actually, no, I take that back. Let's say you had capital now, so you have financial resources, but you don't have any employees. You don't have anything built out that you have now. You just have your brain, you have all the experiences. What would be some of the things that you would do if you had to reset and you had to build your business from scratch, but maybe you have some finances in order to do it? What would be some of the changes that you would say, if I did this, things would have come together quicker?
I love that question. It was the question recently posed to someone who I look up to, and to me, they're a mentor. If you asked me a year ago this question, I would not give you this answer. But today, I would invest those capital resources into sales and and marketing. Both of them are important, but like specifically sales assets, people to help bring in prospects would be probably the biggest difference. Like that'd be my first dollar spent. I might have the greatest service in the world, but if I can't go to market with it successfully, I have the best unheard service of mankind. And so this past year, even I've even doubled down on those sales resources, and they're starting to pay big dividends. And and so much of it, it was like, wow, once I get some capital and like I want to make sure my service side is so well figured out, it's going to be so perfect, and then we can scale and make get resources as well. Somebody very near and dear to me said, you know, most problems are fixed when you can bring in more money. So I was like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I would take the capital resources and invest them in sales a whole lot quicker. Marketing would be in another area, although that one there is still a little tricky just because so much of that depends on your inbound and so much of shit that is changing with AI. But with sales has changed over the years, but it's still been very consistent in terms of processes, and that's where I'd put my capital.
Yeah, where do you see it in the future, though? You had mentioned marketing. We're talking about IT. You run an IT company. Do you think that technology will have will it really change a lot of our sales interactions? Do you think some of the human elements will start being peeled away, or do you think that it's going to kind of force us to be focused on connecting that human to human type element?
If I had to guess 10 years from now, like where it'll be, I bet it'll be the last, what you just described. It'll force us to have a more of a human element. I think in between now and 10 years from now, I think we're going to be on this roller coaster that people will be using AI and they'll be using it for content creation. They'll be using it for various sales automations. And there's a lot of that going on right now. But I think what we're going to find out is just like this most recent MIT study where they were studying brains behind those people that are using AI heavily is like all of a sudden their critical thinking skills, the area of the brain isn't activating anymore. And they're not saying that's a permanent change, but they said, well, it's pretty significant. I mean, critical thinking for humans has always been one of the better assets of us humans is we need to be able to work through some things. And so I think we're going to have this wave where people are really going to push technology to the edge. They're going to use it in ways that probably aren't going to be super helpful, even though they might seem that way. And obviously, this is all a guess, but just the way I've seen it, I've seen a big resistance to even prospects when they know that AI is involved. You might utilize it as a tool, and that's fine. But if they sense any hints of that, most of my prospects have tended to, you're not really wanting to connect with me. You just want to connect with my checkbook. And to be fair, like when you remove that human element to critically think and help them through a problem they're looking to solve, that's fair. I mean, that's what it comes out as. So I think 10 years from now, I do think it'll cause more of a human connection, but that's just my best guess.
I remember signing up for my like the first time I signed up for Facebook. Right? I think it was in 2007. Do you have a Facebook account?
Not anymore.
Not
No,
anymore?
I'm like social media agnostic, except for LinkedIn. I do commit to LinkedIn, but
For sure, for sure. So I remember signing up for Facebook and I thought, like many other people out there, oh, this is going to give me an ability to connect in a big, big way. And yes, connect maybe from the sense of being able to message people easier that I maybe would have lost touch with. But isn't it interesting that more and more and more studies come out about how just absolutely lonely we've become as a society? We're actually not connected anymore, at least like any more meaningful, deeper type connection. There's more loneliness. So as you're talking, Nick, I'm thinking about what the future might bring. And there's so many businesses right now that are diving into AI, and rightly so, right? It's there's multiple tools from an efficiency perspective for sure. But I really do wonder how big of a double-edged sword this is going to be for our culture, our society in the future. Yes, more productive. Yes, I'm sure there's a lot of time management things that we can do with it. But what challenges will come? And I really do believe the businesses that understand those challenges and how to really speak to them are going to they're gonna crush it, right? Like if more people are feeling disconnected from a human to human perspective, well, that's a great way to learn different skill sets on how to connect with people for sure. But speaking of AI, I do have a question for you on the IT front, especially as we're, cybersecurity, any company that's focused on, help desk, service desk, all the different things that you may do from a service perspective. how horrified are you regarding AI? Is this from a cybersecurity perspective? Are there things that people really need to be aware of? Do you see a grim future for companies that they just don't focus as much on cybersecurity?
I like the double-edged sword conversation that you brought up. I think that's what it is. I mean, from our perspective, utilizing it, we found a couple very niche things that it's really helped us out with. Like we know what we're looking for, but then we have it do a certain task, right? And it kind of works and does this thing. It's been really beneficial. But to the point of cybersecurity, the reality is it is opening up a huge can of worms. And most people don't even understand how these AI systems work. Like that's one of the biggest issues. Even some of the top engineers in the world are saying it's kind of a mystery because there's so many dynamics to it. So you put your information in these systems and tools and really nobody understands the inner workings except for a handful of people at these companies. And so I do think it comes down to a double-edged sword. It's like there is value there. You can get a ton more productivity and efficiency there, as long as you know you're creating better outcomes, a better value than before. But at the same point, too, I think it opens you up to a ton of new risks that just didn't exist before. And so, how do you hold the two, right? How do you hold the two together and try to find the best outcome? Because with it being unknown, I mean, 10 years from now, I might look back at this and say, boy, Nick, you were pretty far off. Hey, I ended up really doing some amazing things. Or I could look back and say, wow, I mean, there's not much AI as we see it today. And I think the unknown future is really where people get scared, and from both extremes. Like you can have people come in and say, AI is like the greatest thing in the world. It's literally going to take over every job, which I think, okay, that's pretty far because I just don't think these systems are designed to do that. And then you have the other side, which says, it's evil, like it's really going to destroy us as a human race. It's like, wow, okay. I mean, there's a lot of inventions over the years that have benefited society just as well as hurt society. So I think it's just a new fun thing for people to talk about. But from an IT perspective, it definitely makes my specific industry very tricky because it affects us in such a direct way. And pretty much every industry is like being forced to deal with it. But as technology leaders, like our company needs to figure out what to do with it faster than most because our job is really surrounded with eliminating risk for our customers. So yeah, it's definitely a tricky bag, and I feel like right here, I don't want to be a fortune teller because it's just so hard. But I did the double-edged sword is a great way to look at it, and I think people just need to understand the risks better and hold the two. Like, okay, what value are we getting from it? Is it worth this potential risk? And from there, every entrepreneur, every business owner, every executive of these companies are just better off understanding both of those balances.
For sure. That's a really good point. So you mentioned, starting a business, you mentioned, focusing on sales and, everyone that starts a business, they need to focus obviously on sales and marketing and there's operations and there's the service or product that they're providing and all of these different things. But it's very rare that someone starts a business and they immediately think of IT, right? If that's not the world they're in. So for anyone listening that, they have a great business. They're providing a lot of value to their clients, but they haven't really thought of cybersecurity, IT, the different things that you do. What do you recommend, like from a series of, let's say, a few priorities on what they should focus in on? What recommendations would you give?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost, like when I meet with any prospect, what I try to do is remind them the sole purpose of technology is to increase teamwork and collaboration. That might be with your coworkers and employees, or it might be with customers. But like at the end of the day, technology is used to increase teamwork and collaboration. If it's not used for those two things, you really need to reevaluate it. And so, even just think about it from a risk perspective, a cybersecurity perspective, most people even getting started out, they love to add technology, but it actually kind of takes away from the work they're trying to produce. And so from just a priority perspective, I always tell people, hey, how is this increasing your teamwork or collaboration with your customers or coworkers? It has to do one or the other. Because if it's not doing that, then it's kind of a waste of money And I think a lot of people spend a lot of money on technology, and it doesn't really accomplish a whole lot for them. And so the number one thing it has to do is it has to be effective, and it has to make you more efficient at doing those two things. That's really the whole point of it. And then really outside of that, the risk really becomes of distraction, which might not sound like the first thing I'd recommend, especially from a cybersecurity. But the number one risk to anybody's organization is distraction and a lack of priority setting. And I feel like technology is one of those that gets in people's way pretty darn quickly. And for a lot of manufacturers, we deal a lot with the manufacturing industry. We work in other industries, but manufacturing is really our bread and butter. And these owners, what they're looking for, it's very natural for them because they're very resistant to integrate anything new unless it's necessary, because their whole organization is built off of how quickly can we streamline this product or this specific thing. And so that's kind of why I love the industry, is because they just want to be effective. They just want to be efficient. And so even from that perspective, you just need to remember, hey, is this helping me get my priorities done? Is it increasing my teamwork and collaboration? And then from there, you can figure out whether it's worthwhile of your time or not.
Wow. There's a lot of wisdom in that. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you so much. There's some takeaways that I'm going to have after we're done, and I'm going to be thinking about this and processing through this because I think there's a lot of wisdom in it. Simple but powerful, right? The first thing that you said, that something that we should all focus on. You said there's a big difference between good customer service and a great experience. I think often in business, we talk about how can we have better customer service, but are we actually thinking about it from an experience perspective? And then you went on to say it's in the margins, right? Those little margins, little details that add up to being that great experience. I thought that was really important. The second point was you talking about when we're struggling or we're going through something, a lot of it is it's self-centered and we're not focused on the gratitude. You said we have to be grateful. And then you shared that story of that 15-year-old that's taking care of brothers and sisters. Just wild to think about, right? Talk about hardship. I can't even imagine being the head of a household at 15. So that really gives a perspective shift. And we do need to focus on being grateful, right? Not our self-centeredness and not our challenges. It's really important. And then the third and final piece, when you're talking about technology, you said, every time we implement technology or are about to implement technology, any kind of system or software, we have to ask ourselves, does it increase teamwork and collaboration? I think if more people ask those questions, they would save themselves not only from maybe a financial mistake, but also from just a complete time suck, complete waste of time. And I think that what you shared is something that we should all think about, process through, and continue to ask those questions to refine that. So I really, really appreciate your time today. Nick, if someone wants to get more information on what you do, they want to reach out to you for these IT services, where's the best place they can go to get that information?
Yeah, so I do have a LinkedIn presence, so I'm happy to drop my LinkedIn URL. I also, best way, honestly, is a website as well. There's a lot of great technology we included there to make sure you're getting as many resources as possible and to make connections with me.
Perfect. I'll include that in the show notes. People could just click and go from there. Thank you again. Really appreciate your time today, Nick.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. If you found this discussion helpful, please leave a review, since positive reviews help others find these conversations. New episodes drop regularly, so stay tuned. And remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to take action, you must share more stories.